WWE Attitude Era, Volume 2. Here it is, folks, the DVD copy. Watched all 3 discs, and here is the review of WWE Attitude Era, Volume 2, in case you weren't getting enough Attitude Era on the WWE Network for only $9.99 a month. Also, if you subscribe right now, the WWE Network is free for the rest of November, including Survivor Series. But if you weren't getting enough Attitude Era in their million-part series and all their documentaries on the Attitude Era, here it is, folks, Attitude Era Volume 2. It actually is a good pickup. I would pick it up, especially if you own Attitude Era Volume 1 and you're a collector of WWE DVDs. I would definitely advise you to pick this up. Definitely a very solid DVD. The first DVD, Attitude Era Volume 1, had a documentary on the Attitude Era, and then some bonus features on Disc 2 and 3, which are pretty cool, some matches and some moments. Where this, you had some stories there in between, but pretty much it was moments and matches cut up with some interviews from talent from the Attitude Era, which some of which was pretty interesting, I gotta say. You got into Disc 1, you got classic swimsuit competition with Sable, Sunny, Marlena, and the Funkettes, not to be confused with the Funkadactyls. Didn't even know these girls existed, the Funkettes. Gotta love it. You have a match with Owen Hart versus Shawn Michaels at the end of 1997. Owen Hart actually getting a title shot against Shawn Michaels on Monday Night Raw. Pretty cool. The Rock versus Ken Shamrock Intercontinental title match. That has been on a few other collections. Same thing with Steve Austin versus Vince McMahon. Because Vince McMahon can beat Steve Austin with one arm tied behind his back. Owen Hart and the LOD versus the New Age Outlaws and Triple H. DX invading New York. Those vignettes were cool. I remember some of them, but I feel like they showed all of them in the series of vignettes that they filmed in New York. That was pretty cool, seeing that classic stuff. I don't really remember that being showcased too much on prior DVD releases on D-Generation X or Triple H or anything like that. You had Falls Count Anywhere #1 contender match, Mankind versus Kane. You had Sable versus Jackie. You had another bikini contest right before this. Jerry Lawler talks about the puppies and how he wasn't the one who originated the name. It was actually the Road Dogg, Jesse James, who initiated the name the puppies. And Jerry Lawler, of course, ran with it as kind of his gimmick on commentary, the perverted old guy who loved the puppies. Gangrel versus Edge versus D'Lo Brown versus Jeff Jarrett versus Droz versus Mark Mero for the #1 contender for the European title match. Then you have X-Pac versus The Rock for the WWE Championship. This was very interesting, and before the match, X-Pac talks about how he got the name X-Pac going into the WWE, not wanting to go back to the name 1-2-3 Kid, and how he went from Six-Pac in the NWO and WCW to X-Pac in the WWE. And you get to Disc 2, you get a story about The Godfather talking about how he became the pimp and how his wife had some influence in that. He had a good match there, Godfather and Val Venus versus Mark Henry and D'Lo Brown. You had Triple H versus Edge. That was really cool. Very young Edge, right when he was starting to be affiliated with the Brood. You had Triple H and DX out there as well. Really intriguing match of these two future Hall of Famers. It was actually my favorite match on the compilation. Steve Austin versus Kane. You had Edge talking about the bloodbaths and how people hated to get him and how that kind of caused heat in the back. That was an interesting story. You had The Godfather talking about how he is a country fan and how he was kind of, how his passengers, Yokozuna and others who used to ride with him, did not exactly feel his love of country music in the 90s. That was an interesting story, especially considering I am not a fan of country music, but I have a girlfriend who absolutely loves it, so I feel you, Yokozuna. I feel you. Rest in peace. Godfather versus Goldust. Hardy Boys versus Edge and Christian on Shotgun Saturday Night. This may actually be the first time the Hardys and Edge and Christian faced off. Quite interesting. You had a casket match, The Rock versus The Undertaker. You had and then you had Jeff Jarrett versus Test for the Intercontinental title. then Dis 3, APA stories. You had Mark Henry talking about how he got the name Sexual Chocolate. Sex therapy sections, which was quite awkward yet entertaining. Mark Henry having these little vignettes with sex therapists. And then you had Mark Henry and Mae Young attempting to get a room in a hotel. Oh, that was delightfully awkward as well. Kurt Angle versus Chris Jericho versus Taz for the European title. You had Chris Jericho versus Kurt Angle Intercontinental title. Eddie Guerrero versus Dean Malenko on Sunday Night Heat. You had The Rock and Lita versus Kurt Angle and Stephanie McMahon Helmsley. This is when Kurt was getting interjected in the Stephanie McMahon and Triple H love triangle. I believe this is when Kurt actually kisses Stephanie McMahon in the back, carries her in the back, and then kind of has the lip lock with her as Raw goes to black. Quite the interesting segment, especially looking back at it 15 years later. Lita versus Ivory versus Jacqueline. Great to see Ivory and Jacqueline showcased on this DVD, especially Ivory. Big fan of Ivory. Was not feeling Lita's music, how they changed it to the generic little whatever. I didn't realize they didn't have the rights to Lita's entrance music, and always ticks me off when they overdouble the original entrance music. I am not a fan of that. I feel like it ruins the memories. They talk about how Jerry Briscoe had a weak stomach. Jerry Briscoe versus Crash Holly. An evening gown hardcore championship match. Pat Patterson versus Gerald Briscoe. Clearly a rib on Pat Patterson. And then you had Crash Holly running in on that, winning the hardcore title with the 24/7 rule with his own referee. That was pretty cool. And then to end the compilation, you have a very momentous match, a match that's still talked about to this day. The main event of Raw, July 31st, 2000. The Rock and Lita versus Triple H and Trish Stratus. Very interesting match. This is when Trish was starting to be affiliated with Vince and the whole dog barking thing, and the whole, looking back on this was July, and that storyline went all the way into WrestleMania 2001. So they got a lot of mileage out of that storyline, and that moment to have Lita and Trish main event Raw with Triple H and Rock, I mean, momentous moment for the Divas, one of the greatest moments, I feel, for the Divas of the Attitude Era. And but overall, I would say purchase this DVD. They got to look at the inside cover art. I actually like the inside cover art. I think it's very nice. A little bit differently done than the first one as the cover. We showcased it earlier as the back cover. So, folks, I would pick this up. Attitude Era Volume 2. Pick it up if you're a DVD collector. Joe Passarelli approved. I would give it 4 out of 5 stars. Solid compilation. And ironically, a lot of stuff you won't get on the WWE Network because they haven't put all the Raws from the 90s up, or all the Nitros. Not that this is a Nitro compilation. Or ECW. They're still kind of milking that content. So pick it up, folks. Attitude Era Volume 2. Joe Passarelli. Subscribe.